think whatever energy we harness in our life, we take with us in the spirit world, and that's been my experience. If you're a kind and loving person in your life now, then that will come through in the spirit world as well. And just with my brief encounters, this is what I've experienced. I don't know, this is a strange thought, but I think we can come and go. Some spirits all can come and go. They can be in the world that they're in, and they can be in our world.
Welcome to the Spirit Sisters podcast. My name is Karina Machado, and I'm the author of Spirit Sisters, Women's True Stories of the Paranormal. In this podcast, I'll revisit the women behind my most unforgettable stories and unearth new tales to chill, intrigue, astound, and offer hope. You'll hear first-hand accounts of sacred journeys, spirit encounters, near-death experiences, angels, mysteries, marvels, and love more powerful than death. Whatever you believe about the afterlife, I invite you to open your minds and hearts as ordinary people reveal their extraordinary encounters. I acknowledge the Dharawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land of Sutherland Shire in Australia, where I live and record Spirit Sisters, and I recognise their continuing connection to lands, waters and community. I pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past, present and emerging. You're listening to Spirit Sisters. I'm your host, Karina Machado. I'm so happy to be back after a long break, and I'm so grateful for your patience and your lovely messages. I experienced a bit of a challenging time towards the end of last year, and so I felt I had to kind of press pause on the podcast and a few other things in order to look after myself. I've re-emerged now with nothing but gratitude for the opportunities that I've had to really examine my thoughts and the way that they can spiral in harmful ways, and to find better ways to cope with those thoughts and to turn them around. So on that note, I just thought I'd quickly share something for anyone listening who might also struggle with rumination and unhelpful thoughts. It's an offering from the Netflix documentary Stutz. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It explores the teachings of a psychologist who works with the actor Jonah Hill. Stutz says, "Do you want to be right or do you want to create?" To me, that just struck me as so powerful, because I've found that if I'm stuck in old stories down the ego rabbit hole, I'm not attending to my soul, to the spirit, to the activities that fire up my soul, like doing this podcast. And so, in the spirit of creating and healing, I'm so pleased to share this episode with you this week. My guest is Chrissy, a teacher specialising in well-being who lives in Victoria. Chrissy has had a lifetime of fascinating encounters with the spirit world, and we're concentrating on 3 key stories in this episode. From a heart-stopping brush with a spirit man when she was a little girl, to the chilling yet poignant experiences of her adult years, Chrissy draws us close around the virtual fireside today as she explores the defining spiritual encounters of her life. Of these, there's one in particular that Chrissy will never forget. It involves a pair of siblings searching for their parents in Victoria's historic Ballarat region. There's an intriguing postscript to this story which also offers clues as to the identity of the children. Chrissy recently discovered that there had been an orphanage built in 1865 just minutes away from where she was staying when she'd met the children. I'll be posting more about this on social media, so check out my Facebook page and Instagram page for that. But for now, enjoy my conversation with Chrissy, who tells the story of spirits who dwell in the threshold between worlds. Welcome to Spirit Sisters, Chrissy.
Thank you. Hello, and how are you?
I'm very well, and it's lovely to see you face to face, because we've had a few chats over the phone and we've had lots of email correspondence, and we haven't met yet or seen each other. So I'm back to Zoom for this interview. So one benefit is that I get to see you, which is fantastic.
Yes, no, it's good. It's good to be able to see face to face.
It is. So, Chrissy, you wrote to me after listening, I think, to some of my Ghost Files episodes, and you have got an absolutely brilliant little treasure trove of stories to share with us, one in particular that I cannot wait for our audience to hear. And I love your stories because they kind of turn the classic ghost story upside down and give us a new way of looking at them. And you've had these experiences since you were a little girl. So I'd love to begin, if this is okay with you sharing with us sort of your first memories or your first understanding that there was a world beyond our physical realm.
Well, I probably, from early childhood, since about 7 or 8, I've had experiences. And I guess that came from my father, who was very spiritual himself. He was Maori. And so he liked a ghost story, and he would tell me things that had happened to him in his childhood. And I'd listen and go, wow, that's amazing. And so I guess we shared those experiences with each other. Yeah, from 7 or 8 years of age, I became aware of things that were happening in our house that were a bit odd, I thought at the time, and a bit strange. So our house in Adelaide was very old. It was probably built in the 1900s, maybe even earlier. I'm not sure of the exact date. But we moved there in the sort of late 70s, just before I started prep. And there was no issues to begin with, but really probably started with little things that sort of were starting to occur that I noticed and I mentioned to my dad. So do you want me to go down that track?
I would love you to. And as you're talking, I'm thinking that age, 7, 8, is a really key age to begin experiencing these things and also to begin questioning life and what it really is all about. I feel that I hear, it certainly was the case with me, and I feel like I hear that within, this podcasting community, the spiritual community, or just within, friendships in general. Like, this is a key age.
It is, yeah. I find that interesting too. And it's one of the things I picked up in your podcast, was that a lot of people started to experience around the same age. And I was like, oh, that's me too. Yeah, so going back to our house in Adelaide, it started initially with hearing footsteps at all sort of odd times. And I kind of thought they were a bit odd. It was sort of like during the middle of the night, and they sounded sort of like through the house or outside the house sometimes, and they sounded like running steps. So it was just very simple. I just sort of thought, God, that's weird though to, be running so late at night. It would be sort of like sometimes 8:30, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. I'd hear these running steps. And I mentioned it to my father, and I sort of said, I'm hearing these steps outside, like someone running outside my window or down the hallway, and he'd actually had picked up on it as well. So I remember one night we heard the footsteps again, and I actually called out to my dad and sort of said, can you hear that, Dad? Can you hear the footsteps? And he actually ran out the front of the house to see if there was anybody around running, and there was nobody there. And, it sounds odd, and we didn't really, make a big issue of it, but we thought it was unusual. And then basically from there, that's where things started to get a little bit weirder. It was like a door opening, and other things started to happen. I guess it was pretty soon after that I had my experience where I saw a man in my cupboard.
Tell us about that.
We just refurbished the house. We were doing a lovely redecoration, as you do remodelling in the 80s. We were wallpapering and all sorts of things. So my mum had bought me a bunk bed, and it had a cupboard underneath, and I've sent you a photograph of it. And I had, set it up to have all my dolls in, because I was 7 or 8 at the time. And I'd set up a little mini tea party, setting with a chair and table. And it was not tiny, but you could get in there and manoeuvre around. So I had my dolls in there. And I remember I was playing around in my room, and I looked up into the cupboard, and I saw very clearly a man sitting in the cupboard, staring into space. He wasn't looking at me. He was just directly looking forward. He was very deep in thought. He had a darkish suit on. He looked olive-skinned, like my complexion, with the dark hair, and had a moustache. And it was only for a microsecond, but I looked up and I kind of gone, oh, and I was so startled that I sprinted down out of the room, down to the hallway, out the back door near our shed area, and just stood there and went, did I just see what I just saw? It was kind of did I imagine that? And I sort of calmed myself down and I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to go back and I'll check. I didn't say anything to my parents because I thought, this is crazy. I must have imagined it. And I've gone back in there and there was no one there. But I didn't play in the cupboard again after that. So, yeah, I kind of shut it up. It's like,
and you really never played. It sounded so cute. And I will share, with your permission, the photo with the listeners, so on my social media pages, so that they can see and get a sense of how snug the space was, and kind of how startling, as you said, how startling it must have been for you to see a full-sized man sitting
in my cupboard,
wedged in there. Yeah. So how was he sitting, sort of with his knees up, or?
Yeah, on my little seat that I'd put on. Like I'd had a little, I don't know, I'd made some sort of box seat and, just in front of the table, and he was just sitting at the table. He wasn't, like I said, he wasn't looking at me. He was staring directly straight ahead, like he was pondering something or thinking of contemplating. In my experiences, I don't see any vivid colours, so it's either light or dark. So he looked like a dark suit.
Okay. And you mentioned that he had olive skin like yours. Did you?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So obviously in this moment of being a little girl, I don't think you would have thought this, but later, did you come to think, could that have been an ancestor? I know the ancestors are so profound. It's very key in the Maori culture, I think, to honour the ancestors. Is that right?
Yeah, it could, it's a possibility. Everything is a possibility. As an adult now, that's got me thinking. But as a child, I thought he was unrelated. I didn't know this man. I didn't see, I felt like he was almost, looking back now, like he was European of descent, that sort of Italian look, which could be, we're Maoris and Italians can look very similar in aspects.
Potentially he was somebody associated with your old home. You said it was a very old home.
I felt like it was, like he was associated with it. Or, it would be nice to think that maybe it was an ancestor of mine looking after us or being there. But I didn't feel at the time it was that. Okay.
Did you tell your parents about it?
No, I never did. I left it. I remember being I thought I convinced myself that it was my imagination. Although, we'd already had the experiences with the footsteps. I just sort of thought, no, I must have imagined it. But I know I was very wary after that. I didn't want to see anything else again. So I remember I was a fairly shy and introverted child during my childhood. If I wanted to talk about something, it would take a lot of effort to bring it up. So I remember in my room on the bunk bed, I put a pillow up against the safety guards so that, if I woke up in the middle of the night, I didn't see anything. Yeah. I had a night light as well. I started turning on the night light because I didn't like the dark, and I was worried that, I'll wake up and see something move in the room. And I remember I was terrified. I never went down. If I woke up in the middle of the night and needed to go to the toilet, I held on all night. Terrified of going down that hallway because it was very creepy nighttime. So, it was like I said, a very old house. The floorboards creaked, and actual fact, I think I told you this previously, when we were renovating the kitchen area, we lifted up the floors and we actually found a cellar underneath the kitchen floor. So it was, and when we climbed down in there, we found an old lady's old-fashioned lace-up boot.
You did tell me that, yeah. So the lace-up boot, that's kind of, I think, off the top of my head, kind of the Edwardian period. Very old shoe.
Yeah, so I don't know what we did with the boot either. We should have kept it.
The real relic. And I'm glancing at your notes as I talk to you because you've written to me that after that, things just got weirder. What happened?
Yeah, so there was lots of wake-ups in the night. And I was a really good sleeper. And I wake up in the middle of the night. There were dark shapes and shadows. I remember one night in particular, I woke up and I thought what was shadows from the, my little night light was casting on the wall, but they didn't look right. And then they seemed to move across the wall. And I remember being absolutely terrified and thinking, is this another strange thing that's, that is happening again? And I remember watching these shapes and they just didn't, they didn't look right going across the room and moving around the edges of the walls and over my my shelves. And I think in the end I was so terrified, I just pulled the covers over my head and went back to sleep and thought I'll just push past this. I'm not going to wake anyone. The other little things that sort of happened, there were just like things like my toys, a couple of my toys would be moved around. I remember one night, it was a very hot night, and so my dad had put a fan up on top of my wardrobe so that it could get me reach me at the bunk bed. And I woke up, and this is why I don't think that these spirits were meaning any harm. I think they were just there. They were part of the house. I woke up this night anyway and looked at the fan, and it just stopped dead. And I thought, oh, that's a bit strange. I'll tell Dad about that in the morning and let him know my fan's broken. However, I was watching and it started to glow in the centre. And I never usually, woke up in the middle of the night. This was just strange that I'd, woken up. Usually, like I said, slept through pretty well. And it started to glow, and eventually I could see like a match flame behind it. And I thought, oh my God, the fire, the fan is on fire. And I still think to this day that something woke me up in time, because this is in the time of the 80s. I don't know whether you know about the Maxwell fans. They had a history of setting alight. So this is at the time when no one knew that this was happening, and a lot of families died having these fans on, and they set alight. So we had to get rid of a whole heap of them in the end, because there was a note from the factory to sort of say, yeah, we've got to get rid of all these Maxwell fans. I knew that night. From then on, I thought, this is not a bad ghost if he's or she's looking after me to wake me up in time just before my fan set on fire. So I was able to call out to Dad, and he was able to come grab them. And it did. It literally just went boom, up in flames.
God.
And if that had been a second later, I might not be here talking to you today, Karina.
That's chilling, Chrissy. My gosh.
So there was just things like that, instances that you kind of go, wow, okay. And, there's nothing really much you can do with them except sort of accept them and go, well, that's strange. And,
yes. That's definitely a theme of my work over the years, and that that people just keep on living. They just keep on living. It's not the Hollywood, run for the hills, leave the house in the night. Although I have spoken to people that have had to do that, but that is certainly more on the anomalous side. Like, it is usually just, oh, well, wake up next day and, go to Coles and, vacuum as usual, like go to work. We just keep living through the strangest experiences.
Well, it's not until opportunities like this that you get to speak about things, that had happened. It's not an everyday conversation. Like, I wouldn't go to school and say, hey, guess what happened to me last night?
Yes.
Or, I saw a strange man in my cupboard. It's not,
And you said you went to Catholic school as a child, but it very much was not to do with the faith of your family. Your mum was an atheist, you told me, and Dad had his Maori spirituality. But was that a big part of your childhood, his spirituality, or was that more of an in the background thing?
Probably in the background sort of thing. I was interested, but, and we would talk about things, but not a focal point.
And you had an experience. So your dad passed away in 1986, so you would have been quite young.
Yeah, I was 13.
That was obviously, it was like a bomb going off in your house. I'm just reading your notes here, Chrissy. But then something happened about 2 or 3 days after he passed away. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. This one's close to my heart. So, at the time, we were obviously very distressed after, because he died suddenly. It wasn't expected. He was a young man, fit, and he passed away very suddenly. A couple of days later, it must have been after his funeral, maybe, because he died on the Tuesday. Things were a bit quicker then, and he had a funeral on the Thursday. Yeah, so it must have been over the weekend. I had a dream, and a dream where he was in the lounge room, and I went down, I saw him sitting in the chair, and I was really excited to see him. And he explained that he couldn't be there for very long. He just wanted to let me know that he was okay and he was happy where he was. It was a very short dream. It was very brief, but I feel like it was a visitation from him to say that he was okay. I was really excited in the dream. I was just saying, hang on, just let me get mum and Liz, and I wanted to bring them. And he's going, no, I don't have time for that. I just want to let you know that I'm okay and everything's good where I am. So, and that was just the message of the dream. And I woke up from that dream and I felt very at peace and happy to know that he was okay.
Again, just going back to many other interviews I've done, that is the overriding message of those after-death communication dreams. They leave the person who's grieving the experiencer with a deep sense of peace, which I imagine is so welcome in that moment.
And I think, because of our connection, we were very close. I feel like that's, it was a way of sort of reassuring me that it was okay, because I remember I was, obviously a very awful time and trying to settle myself and, go back to school and help mum out at home. So just a very yuck time.
Oh, I can't imagine.
That was nice to have it.
Yes, and he was sitting in his favourite chair, I remember you said as well.
Yes, he was, yeah. That was very key in the dream. So I like to think that it was a visitation, that it was more than just a dream. But I know after that too, because we had a cat, the cat would always be around that chair, and the cat was lost for a few days, just walking around meowing into space. And that was Dad's cat. And I know after two, later on, it seemed to settle the house. I found things in the house settled. There was less goings on, less things, such as the footsteps and things moving around. He must have come in and settled things for us.
He had a word.
He had a word. Maybe he should go and move out. It's my territory.
Okay, so now I think, tell me what you think of this. Shall we move on to when you were around 17? Because that seems to be about the phase, the next sort of stage in these experiences for you, and they kind of upscale a notch now, don't they?
They do. Now, I wasn't in the same house, so after that, during my early teens, I didn't really have a lot of issues with dreams or encounters or anything like that. So there was a period in my life where it was fairly quiet. I don't know whether that was just a stage I was going through, or my mind sort of being too busy with other things. But probably around 17, we'd moved house by this stage to another place in Adelaide, and I was at the end of probably year 12, end of high school, and the dreams started. This is the period of my life where I started having dreams of different people, different energies standing at my bed. Generally, it scared the crap out of me. Yeah. And I didn't know how to handle it at the time, and I just took it as bad dreams. And I thought they were just sort of experiences that were, maybe I was a bit stressed. So I was looking into it that way, and I was a bit confused about. But what was really strange about them was that they were all different people at first. And the first one I had in my house, my new house, it was not even. It was shaped like a body, but it didn't have any features or clothing that I could see. And it was wandering around my room and ran down, and when it noticed that it was, I was looking at it, it, pounced on me. Yeah, so that was quite frightening, and I've sort of jumped up and gone, oh my God, what's that? So that was the start of it all. And then I started having, not regular, but, dreams here and there of different people, men, women, not many children, usually adults at this stage.
If I can just backtrack a little bit, because one thing that I've made note of here, which I thought was fascinating, you did write to me about the shape that was in the face of in the shape of a person, but you've also written to me that it was static. There was static quality. And I found that so interesting because back when in my own home, many years ago, we lived in an old little Californian bungalow, and my husband began to see some spirits. I never saw them. He saw full manifestations, and they were, clear as day. whereas I didn't see them, but I felt the static in the air. And it was like, I'd describe it as the air before a thunderstorm, like that kind of feeling. And that was me. And then with all of the people, sorry, not all, many of my interviewees throughout the years in my books telling me about such experiences, I noticed one common denominator was this feeling of static and, you know, your hair standing on end, some bristly kind of feeling on the skin. And I thought, that's really interesting. What is this? There's something here with this static.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was the only experience where I had where the shape was static. After that, they turned into full form adults. So it's interesting, isn't it, that, the shapes and the different things, even as a child where I saw shadows, you know, in the room sort of moving across. So
there seems to be an evolution in the way you're seeing them. And then they now come to, we're coming to see full form soon. But I just wanted to ask, so with these experiences that you began to see, so that, for instance, this figure moving around your room, so you described them as dreams, but would you say now that it could have been that you were awake and seeing this and you just categorized it as a dream because that's easier?
Yes, definitely. I'd class them as dreams, and that's why I looked into, you know, dreams about people standing over you, whether it meant something subconsciously. I was looking at it from that angle, even though there was a little bit of me that, you know, kind of went, this is very bizarre, and trying to get my head around it. But, you know, again, it was early 90s, and there was still that sort of stigma about the spiritual world. You know, you'd only see sort of ghost stories being sensationalized on TVs. It wasn't something that I kind of went, okay, I have someone to talk to about it, you know, and relay ideas. So when I heard your podcast and I heard people talking about their experiences, I was going, this is some of the things that happened to me.
I'm glad about that, because the purpose of all of this is to create a sense of community, whether it's through my writing or through my podcast, so people don't feel alone with these stories.
Well, the other thing is too, in my experience, there's two types of people. There are people that, like you, that are open to it and go, wow, that's so interesting. And, you know, have you thought about the possibilities of it being this and that? And then there are other people that were just like, that's nonsense, you're imagining things, you know. I like to take away that there's this is something that's unusual that's happened to me, and I think it's a lot deeper than what I initially thought.
Yes. And so are there any of those particular experiences with seeing the people standing over you, looking at you, that have really stuck in your mind that you'd like to tell us about?
I guess there's two experiences. So the experience I had in Ballarat with the two children, and also another experience which we can, if we've got time, I'll share. These two experiences stand out because I was able to verify. I guess, you know, in my mind, I felt like I had to prove that they were true. They weren't just dreams at the time. So these experiences, I was able to sort of make some connections and realise I don't think this is a coincidence. I think this might be something a bit more unusual. One of the experiences that I had was in Ballarat, and this one was a fairly strong experience for me because it was one which I was able to verify, you know, that it actually happened. So anyway, to start at the beginning, I was with my previous partner, and we were staying with his brother and his wife in their new home in Ballarat, which wasn't far from Sovereign Hill. That gives you a bit of an idea. And the first night I was there, I had a dream again, where I wake up and I see people. And in this particular night, I saw a young girl at my bedside looking at me. Now, when I saw her, I've done my usual thing, which is sit up in the bed and scream my head off, which is quite often how the dreams ended, because it's like, oh my God, who is this person? And I woke up my partner, and he's sort of like, oh my God, are you all right? I'm going, oh, I just had a bad dream. I saw this little girl. And he's like, oh, that's all right. Don't worry. Go back to sleep. You'll be okay. And I thought nothing of it. I sort of went back to sleep and thought, okay, no worries. Anyway, the next morning I sort of kind of laughed it off and said, are you okay? Did I peel you off the ceiling, after screaming, waking you up last night? And we kind of laughed it off and didn't think anything of it. I didn't mention it to his brother or her, and his wife. We just left it. Anyway, the second night I was there, again, the same thing happened, and I saw a young girl. She had blonde hair. I could only see her really in one colour, so she looked like she was wearing a white kind of nightgown, and it looked like she had light hair, looking at me. And just as I was about to do my usual scream the place down, I just felt an intense, like, calming that, when you sort of just go into a relaxed state and everything just sort of not frozen, but just everything relaxed. And I felt really peaceful and calm. And I remember looking at her, and her energy was that she was looking for her parents. And because I was able to focus a little bit more and not be so panicked, I could sort of, look down, and I noticed that there was a little boy as well with her. I could only really see his head, and I sort of looked down, and because I was in a calmer state, I could take more things in. And it was a very short interlude, but I just felt that her energy was saying to me, I'm looking for my parents. And that was that. I woke up the next morning. I kind of thought, wow, that's really strange that 2 nights in a row I've had a dream about this young girl. Then that day, my partner went off with his brother, and they had an outing, whatever. And me and Janine, the brother's wife, went off to a day spa, and we had a lovely day. And anyway, as we were driving back, I kind of was talking to her, and I sort of said, I made mention, I asked her whether she thought her place was haunted. And she's going, oh, why? I kind of explained to her what had happened in the 2 previous nights. And she went deathly quiet. And I thought, oh, no, I shouldn't have mentioned anything. She's going to think I'm nuts. And I sort of said, oh, I'm sorry, don't worry about it. And she's going, no, I'm only going quiet because I've actually had the same experience. My recollection, when I explained it to you originally, was that she'd experienced hearing noises of feet, like running through the house.
She'd heard children in the garden?
She'd heard children, yeah. She'd heard, and she thought it sounded like they were playing, but she couldn't, work out. Like, there was no children to either side of her, living on either side of the houses that she was, that she could see. And she thought it was just very odd. And then, there would be like sounds in the kitchen, basically, of footsteps going through. So that's my recollection of it when she was explaining. However, so after I explained that to you, you were sort of relayed that, could you think of whereabouts in Ballarat? And I was thinking, gosh, I can't think of the address. It's, like I said, nearly 27 odd years ago. So I knew that probably I'd be able to find her on Facebook, and it really was. It's been a long time, 93, I think I last spoke to her. Broke up with that partner, and so you just kind of lose touch. Anyway, I contacted her through Facebook, and I didn't know whether she'd respond. And anyway, I messaged her and said, hi, Janine, do you remember me? I kind of told her the reason why I was contacting her was that, the experience I had in her house. And I didn't go into detail because I thought I don't want to sort of preempt anything, but I just sort of said, and she messaged me back amazingly and sort of said, yes, of course I remember you. And yes, you've confirmed, you confirmed that there was a little child in my house. And then I've written back and sort of said, yes, it was a boy and a girl. And then she's relayed her message and her experience of what she experienced in the house. And I had forgotten her total recollection of it all. Do you want me to go into that?
Yes, please, because when I read that, when you shared it with me in email, it was like, oh my gosh, tell us.
I felt a bit sick. I felt a bit sick at the time when she actually, kind of went.
Yeah,
my recollection was that she hadn't seen the children. So when she wrote back, a message back, she said, yes, I too seen the boy and the girl in the house. And as far as I know, you and I are the only ones that experienced them. And pretty much after that, there was nothing. She just said nothing else happened. But her experience was that she was one night in her bedroom. She heard some footsteps or something wobbled or something in the kitchen that would indicate that someone was, yeah.
And let's let everybody know that Janine has given us permission, hasn't she, to share
Yes,
this?
she has. I checked to see whether that was okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to find it and read it if that's all right with you.
Yes,
Just
do
a little
please.
bit about it, because it's so amazing.
Chilled me to the bone when she sort of kind of
Absolutely.
said it. I just went, oh my gosh, did you really?
Okay. I'm just actually looking for it because it was, and this was another lovely aspect of this story with the children, is that you and Janine have reconnected, and it's this beautiful, warm exchange, and I love it. She's written, Chrissy, I too saw the boy and the girl. They made the kitchen hutch in the dining room wobble. It was on a loose floorboard, and if you moved past it, then it would wobble. I sat bolt upright in bed, sure that someone had broken into the house. She screamed out to her partner if it was him, and there was no reply. I armed myself with the thick end of a pool stick that we kept next to the bed for security, figured I'd go down with a fight, and then a young boy and girl appeared in my bedroom doorway, dressed in period costume as they would wear at Sovereign Hill, which is a tourist attraction just over the hill. A lot of people might know of Sovereign Hill. It sort of recreates that period, doesn't it? Back to Janine's message, I remember thinking they must have been on a school camp and somehow ended up in my house. They smiled at me. The little girl waved, and into the wall they went. I felt a huge sense of calm, which I found fascinating because that's what you felt. And
it was uncanny.
Yeah.
No. So we have not talked for 27 plus years. So when she relayed that, and in my message, you can see that's why I sent you the whole message, so that you knew that I wasn't retelling her the story.
Yeah.
I just said to her, do you remember how we talked about, on the way back from the car, and sort of said, I saw two little children in your house. But she told her details, and I kind of went, well, even on that day back on the drive back from the day spa, when we were both sort of kind of wide-eyed and going, okay, all right. So what we saw was two children. There was no internet, so we couldn't sort of search for a history. I thought possibly, we came up with ideas that maybe they died in a tragedy, died suddenly, and they were looking for their parents.
Janine writes here as well. She says, I asked a friend at the time that dabbled in the spirit world, and she said that ghosts, especially kids, tend to get stuck in loops of the life they knew and the places that they knew still when they were a child. It's almost like a game they're playing. So listeners of mine will know that I've interviewed people before. There are a few that stand out, like my lovely friend Danielle, who seem to almost specialize in helping children that are lost between worlds and searching. Danielle's story is very much about children who contact her, and they appear to be stuck between dimensions. And like your little girl and boy that you saw, they are searching for their families. They're searching for home. And it's a very poignant thing, isn't it?
No, it was an experience that stayed with me for a very long time. I've never forgotten that story, never forgotten the experience. It's like it happened yesterday. I can remember it in detail, like it happened yesterday.
And my listeners will get cranky with me if I don't ask you exactly how they looked and what they were wearing. So you told us that she seemed to be in a little nightgown. So what age would you think that she was?
I'd probably say she would be between 9 and 11. It's hard to tell with kids these days. But, yeah, the boy looked around about 4, I'm guessing, 4 or 5. Yeah, so around those ages. I wouldn't say she was still very young. I wouldn't say she was a teenager or anything like that. She was a teenager.
And how close was she standing to you?
Very close. It was like almost at the, like you stand close to the bed to look over someone. Yeah, that close. And the little boy was, like head peeking over the doona trying to look at me.
So that's a very moving experience that you've had on this little getaway that you've gone on with your partner, and you've seen these children 2 days in a row, and then you've had the experience with the lady of the house confirming in a way what you have experienced. So how then did you move on with life and put that out? Did you just pop it out of your mind, or we know that we talked come?
Yeah, we did. We talked about it obviously that day and sort of mentioned it more to our partners that night, and they were fairly dismissive, as it would be. They were just like, oh yeah, and we left it at that. Oh, it's a weird coincidence. But Janine and I, we knew something had gone on. But like I said, if we'd had a chance to sort of maybe use the internet and try and work out if there was a history in the house or et cetera, and yeah, again, there wasn't
back then. So, that's right.
No.
All right. Well, you mentioned another key story, Chrissy. So do you want to share that one with us as well?
Okay, so this is another one that was a strong experience for me because, again, it was proved to be more than a coincidence or just a dream. I had recently met my new partner that I'm now married to. We met actually in the Northern Territory teaching, not actually at the same school, but we met just through a mixed netball group. Anyway, I had come over to his place in Victoria to stay over New Year's Eve, just for the holidays. He lived in an older house that they'd had since childhood. It was on a farming property, lots of acres, that sort of thing. Stayed there for a few nights, and one of the nights I had a dream again where I sort of woke, I felt, and I saw a young man. He was rather tall, dark-haired, long hair, not anything really outstanding in what he was wearing. He looked like to be a T-shirt and jeans on. And he was just walked into, because we were staying in my partner's old bedroom. He just walked into my partner's bedroom and was sort of, walking around and like he was part of the furniture. And I've done my usual. I've kind of sat up and gone, Rah! And screamed the place down. And woke up and woke everyone up in the house, and they were going, oh my God, are you all right? I'm going, yeah, I'm fine. I just had a bad dream.
So you didn't tell them in that moment? Yeah.
No, I didn't. I was trying to calm everyone down because everyone's, you've just sort of woken everyone up and you go, no, that's fine. I just had a bad dream, and I sort of knew what I dreamed and I thought about it and I was sort of didn't, worry about it too much the next day. I thought, that was weird. Okay. And then, maybe it was like the next trip that I saw this particular ghost again. So that was that. It was done, whatever. The next trip I was staying there, we were actually in the lounge room area on a blow-up bed because there was other people staying in the house. And I again woke up in the middle of the night, but this time it was the same man, but he was directly over me. So if you can imagine the blow-up bed, I was laying down and he actually leant over the top of me, and it was like he was looking at me from that sort of angle, that close. He wasn't sitting, he was like leaning over. It felt like he put both hands by the side of my head and was looking over the top. I actually felt the blow-up bed go down at the compression of him leaning in. And just as I was about to let off a big scream again, because I was like, oh my God, I just felt again this complete calming, peace and relaxation, that it's okay. He was just, I think, checking me out to sort of say, who are you? I kind of fell back to sleep again, or went back into a deep sleep, whatever, and woke up the next morning. And I don't know how we got into a conversation about it, but I was talking to my partner's mum. Maybe I mentioned that I'd had a dream again of a boy or a guy walking around in the house. My partner at the time was sort of like, oh, okay, that's weird. But his mum actually said, well, what did he look like? And I've described him. I said he was tall, he had long hair, he was kind of lanky, like big guy, but lanky, and kind of what I remember about him anyway. And I sort of said nothing, nice features in his face, that sort of thing. And she kind of looked at me and then went and retrieved a photo from somewhere of Scott with a group of friends. And she's gone, not this guy, is it? I've looked at the phone. I said it could be, but why would he be in my dreams? Why would I be dreaming about this guy? And then she kind of explained that about 3 or 4 years earlier that this man that I was seeing had died and was one of Scott's best friends.
So Scott is your now husband?
Yes, yeah. So he was, they were very close. He died tragically in a car accident where it wasn't his fault, and it was very traumatic for the family. And one of the reasons why Scott left to go teach in Alice Springs is because he was a bit lost, after his death. So he travelled and met me. So when I saw the photo, I've just gone, yeah, this looks like the guy I dreamt about. And I kind of felt, well, okay, and I know they were very close. And so Scott never spoke about it. He's not one of those people that sort of, and we'd only just really been started our relationship, so wouldn't have come up, I don't think, in conversation. He was very private. Yeah, and I remember him sort of, when his mum was showing the photo, he was kind of getting a bit defensive, like, don't bring those photos out. So when I saw the photo and I went, oh my gosh, this is your friend, Paul. I think what it was, and what I believe, is that he was sussing me out, saying, you better be good to my best friend here. So you look after him.
Very beautiful. It is such an amazing experience. And of course, it does have parallels with your other experience of seeing the children, because like that time you were away from home, and like that time you had 2 separate experiences of the same spirit. And the third thing was, of course, the calming feeling, that both of those encounters shared, which is really, really intriguing. And of course, the biggie is that they were verifiable to a large extent, which is amazing. And that's, it's just to think like what it, we just don't end with the physical body, do we? Like, Scott's friend come to see what's happening here in his life in this next new phase.
Well, I'd like to, it would be very comforting to think that your loved ones would come back and, close friends even sort of will come back and check in to see that you're okay and life's going well for you.
Yeah. And perhaps we could entertain the idea that is always the case. However, there are some of us only that, for whatever reason, as call it the big mystery, some of us can see that and feel it and sense it, and others not so much, not so readily. And you're one of those, Chrissy, who can. Thank you for sharing both of those stories. They are amazing. Now, I think I mentioned to you when we first began talking, Chrissy, that I haven't done an interview about ghosts on Spirit Sisters for a while, and I thought it was time to do that. And what I did mention at the beginning of the podcast too was I just love this idea that, your stories, they give us a hint of another way to look at the classic ghost story, because of the calming feeling, and also with Scott's late friend really just coming to show that there's still this bond of love, almost guardianship, which is really lovely. So I'd like to ask you about that, about all of these years later. You began to see and sense this other realm when you were about 7 or 8. And back then you didn't really understand what you were seeing or experiencing. And now, you seem to have come full circle and are understanding. This is what I'm gathering through our correspondence. And I'd love you to talk about this some more. Just come full circle, understanding the spiritual significance behind seeing a ghost, because I too have come full circle in my work. And that's why in Spirit Sisters, I tend to share now more stories of a spiritual lifetime, more spiritual journeys across a lifetime, and, mystical experiences and whatnot, rather than sort of this is what I saw this night kind of experience. It's expanded, it's an expansion. So I wonder if you are sensing that too, and especially when we think about the experiences that you've had recently too with bereavement, and so what it all means to see a ghost and then to connect it with today.
Wow. Big question there. Lots of thoughts. I think initially, when I was younger, it was very frightening, and so I reacted like any normal person would in something unusual or scary happens. You act terrified. Whereas now I feel over the years it's more of a special experience if there's something I experience something like that. I think we're all energy. I think this is true in the spirit world as well. I think whatever energy we harness in our life, we take with us in the spirit world, and that's been my experience. If you're a kind and loving person in your life now, then that will come through in the spirit world as well. And just with my brief encounters, this is what I've experienced. I don't think people necessarily go to heaven or hell. I don't believe in that. I think that we go somewhere, and I don't know, this is a strange thought, but I think we can come and go. Some spirits all can come and go. They can be in the world that they're in, and they can be in our world. I don't know your thoughts about that.
I agree with you, and based on all of the interviews that I've done over the years, I've interviewed people who, just like you, have woken up to these figures, looking at them with intense curiosity. And sometimes there is a real sense that they are just as surprised to see you as we might be to see them. So I really think you're right with this idea of coming and going, and it is an intersecting of dimensions. And in a lot of spiritual literature, there is this idea that, their world, if we call it that, is just kind of layered above ours, and it's almost simultaneous, but we just can't sense it for the most part. There are some of us that have this talent that is slightly more honed or very much more honed, and that we can, like mediums who can see, spirits looking like flesh and blood people, and yourself. I guess your qualities are those of a medium, Chrissy. Have you ever sort of thought of that?
I probably haven't thought about mediumship, but it's something now that sort of could be a possibility. Not in great, I haven't thought about it in a great deal of thought. That's what I mean. But yeah, possibilities there. I think because of my experiences, and now that I've come full circle and I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with it and a bit more calmer about it than I was initially, maybe. Yeah.
So do you think you might want to focus more on that aspect of yourself and develop it perhaps?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And this is sort of by hearing other people's experiences. I've always been interested, but I've always been sort of on the outer. I've been cautious because, like I said, I didn't know what I was dealing with. And a lot of the time I'd hear stories, people would sort of say, oh, you shouldn't be dabbling with that, looking into that. You could open up things that you don't want to, and all this sort of stuff. So that sort of put me off a little bit. But yeah, I probably with age now, I'm feeling a little bit more in my experiences with my loved one, that I don't feel that I would be in too much peril if I looked into things.
Exactly. And so if I asked you to look back and tell us about the experience that has most affected you throughout your life in terms of these encounters, which one would it be?
Probably the children, yeah. And I guess because it stayed with me for such a long time, and there was unanswered questions, like I don't know what happened to them for sure, what's happened to them. So I have been looking to it.
On that note, there's been a recent discovery, very recent, that you have made, which is, I guess, bringing you closer to putting those pieces together. Do you want to tell us about that?
So after I initially contacted you and told you my story, you sort of put me on track to have a search on a website, which I did, because initially I thought, that they must have died suddenly. It was something tragic. So I was looking at sort of for newspaper articles about 2 siblings that were killed, suddenly or tragically. I couldn't, it was like finding a needle in a haystack, really. And we didn't really have a date or a time. So it was, you could be forever searching. So what I did sort of like trawl the internet, and what kept coming up and, appearing was information about a Ballarat orphanage. And there was an orphanage that is 5 minutes drive from where the property I stayed at.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. That just chills me. And I'm reading here on your notes. So that was in operation, the Ballarat District Orphan Asylum, in operation from 1909 to 1968. And you've written here, it apparently has quite a dreadful history of child abuse. And there was even a lawsuit brought against it by 14 former wards back in 2002. So that abuse occurred in the orphanage in the 60s, which would seem to be decades after the children lived. But go on, scrolling through the photos.
Oh, yes, as I was, do you want to read that bit then?
Yeah, you said scrolling through some of the photos, I noticed the clothing. Tell us what you saw.
As I was looking through, because I was looking for historical photos of anything I could see that I could relate to what I'd seen with the children. And they did. They had the sort of white nightgown so that you could put the black pinafore or something over the top of it. So I was thinking that's similar to what I saw this girl wearing. It sent chills down my spine. I was like, oh gosh, these could be two children that were orphaned and were looking for their parents. It makes sense. Like I said, thought it was they were killed in an accident or something like that,
As we know, in times gone by, often children were left at orphanages, not only because their parents died, but because perhaps one parent died and the other couldn't cope. And they would leave them there sometimes for a time, and then that time would just extend. It's very, very sad circumstances. So it's a moving story. I won't forget them, thanks to you. And maybe, who knows, maybe we'll find some more. And your story, as I said to you, Chrissy, it reminds me of a story that's in my second book, Where Spirits Dwell, called Girl in Gingham. Very similar idea, two spirits. Right. And then we found a place that was very close to the site where the apparitions had appeared. And so I feel like just because it's not exactly on the site, that needn't just exclude that possibility, especially when you've seen two children that are looking for their parents, and here is this orphanage, 5 minutes away. It's extraordinary.
I had no idea that we were that close to it. I don't know whether it's I think it's a cafe now. I'm not sure because I haven't been to Ballarat for a long time, but the original site. Maybe someone in Ballarat can clarify that.
Yeah, and who knows, perhaps someone listening has more information. Please do share with us. And in the meantime, are there any closing remarks that you'd like to leave us with, Chrissy?
Thank you first for the experience. This has just been very grateful. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure. I think if there's anything we can take away from this is my experiences have been very humbling and have probably taught me to live my life very mindfully. I think also if there's something you really want to do in life, make way for it, try and put some steps in place to achieve it, because you never know if you don't try. That's, I think is that overall message from stories like this where things have happened or tragedies have happened where I've had encounters with spirits that maybe didn't fulfill something in their life. So, if there's something you want to do it. Don't put it off. I think also too, don't be afraid to be impulsive because here I am today with you, Karina, talking about my experiences. So go for it.
Thank you, Chrissy. I love your closing remarks on so many levels. I think these stories about the afterlife should really instruct us in how to live this life, walking on planet Earth in our 3 dimensions. If they can support us in that, I love that idea. That's so wonderful. Thank you for reminding us of it. It's really great.
Well, it's so lovely to see you and speak to you.
Likewise. And see, my other podcast recording setup didn't work, but the benefit is we're looking at each other, and that is really nice. Thanks, lovely. Have a beautiful week.
You too. Thank you. I'll be in touch and I'll let you know if I find anything else out about the children.
Yeah, watch this space, everybody. I think we're going to find out some more. We're on it. Bye, Chrissy.
See you later.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Sisters. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. And don't forget to rate and review the show. Have an experience you'd like to share with me? Get in touch at my website, karinamachado.com, or find me on Facebook at Karina Machado Author. After all, there's nothing more powerful than a story.